Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we've got a fascinating stack of source material to get into. We're looking at excerpts from a novel set in the very volatile environment of early 1970s Spain.
That's right.
And our mission today is to take you deep inside this world that revolved around a U.S. Air Force base just outside of Madrid. We want to show you how teenagers and diplomats and spies, how they all ended up in this one really intense location.
Well, this setting is so unique because it forces a collision.
Yeah.
You have two highly organized but completely different societies.
Okay.
On one hand, the American military community, this transient, self-contained bubble they call Royal Oaks.
Right.
And it's planted directly inside La Moraleja, which is this ancient, very exclusive neighborhood of Spanish aristocracy.
And this is all happening when?
All of this is unfolding during the final, really tense years of the Franco dictatorship. So every single political and cultural interaction is just loaded with significance.
So why should you care about some military base from the 1970s? Well, our goal here is to unpack the most compelling intersections. We're going to show how the strict rules of the American base actually created a black market that, both benefited and distorted the local Spanish community.
And how a simple high school romance could get tangled up in an investigation into national nuclear secrets.
Exactly. We're looking for those points where personal lives and high-stakes geopolitics just become inseparable.
It's a study in proximity and alienation, really. The sources show us how people on both sides struggled to maintain their identity and their secrets when their worlds were separated by, sometimes just a white picket fence, but divided by decades of political tension.
Okay, let's unpack that American bubble first. What did it take to maintain this illusion of home in Royal Oaks, Spain?
An incredible level of self-sufficiency. The community lived in these identical duplexes, and they maintained this intensely American landscape. Well, we see it in the details of their moving tradition.
Yeah.
They'd plant a tree when they arrived or when they left. So they were essentially creating this manicured forest, all maintained by local Spanish gardeners who, funnily enough, often used burros to get around the property lines.
So a little slice of America.
Yeah.
And everything inside that bubble, from the architecture to the food, it was all imported.
All of it.
Yeah.
The commissary and the BX were these cultural and economic fortresses.
Right.
Absolutely. The sources described this consumerist bubble that was just constantly struggling with scarcity. They had to fly in everything they needed to maintain that American lifestyle.
Things like what?
Omaha tenderloin, or, the all-important canned cranberry sauce for Thanksgiving. This constant dependency created these almost frantic social rituals.
You mentioned Thanksgiving. That detail about the turkey run, it's really telling.
It speaks to the psychological need for normalcy, doesn't it? The sources detail how residents had to line up to get their Thanksgiving turkeys the Thursday before the holiday because they just flew off the shelves that fast. And even things that seem minor, like eggnog, were strictly rationed, sometimes only a quarter gallon per customer.
So that constant struggle just amplified the feeling of being separate.
And dependent, yeah. And that pressure cooker environment, it naturally defined the American youth. The American School of Madrid, the ASM, was the epicenter of this very strong but also very transient social dynamic.
They knew their time was limited.
Exactly. They lived under what the source calls the Chole y Adios fate. Relationships were super intense because everyone was constantly facing an abrupt departure. You look at Mary, the American cheerleader, and her Spanish boyfriend, Lolo.
Their romance was passionate, but
Inherently temporary. Mary eventually just leaves without any notice. She catches something called a Space A flight.
We should probably define that for you. A Space A flight wasn't like a commercial booking, was it?
Not at all. Space A just stands for space available. It's a military standby flight system. So dependents, personnel, they can fly out for free, but only if there was literally empty space on a military transport.
Which meant what? A sudden call.
A sudden, immediate call to the runway, often with just a few hours' notice. It just underscores how arbitrary and unpredictable life was in that community. You really could be gone tomorrow.
And that school bubble, it wasn't always harmonious. The sources reveal some really serious race-fueled student protests.
This is where American societal conflicts were just imported directly into Spain. You have students, specifically Black, Hispanic, and Asian students, protesting racial bias from a director they called Mr. Blowhole.
And the accusations were serious.
Very. Failing students of color while excusing white students, especially if their parents were high-ranking officers. This internal mess grew so intense that the base commander and the military police had to come in and shut down the auditorium.
So even an ocean away, they couldn't escape America's internal tensions.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Right outside the fence, you have the Spanish neighbors keenly aware of all this American opulence and their oddities.
Right, like the Tenorio family.
Exactly. Spanish middle-class newcomers in La Moraleja. And they felt completely out of place among the Condesas and Marquesas who dominated that neighborhood.
And their son, Lolo, has to kind of bridge this gap to see Mary.
He literally has to. He needs American dollars just to buy a cheeseburger at the American pool. It's a perfect little example of that financial chasm.
That economic divide wasn't just about poolside cheeseburgers, though. It led directly to this hidden economy running right under the base.
It did.
And one American high schooler, Mary, she finds herself right in the middle of it. She's working at a gas station that was basically ground zero for the black market.
This is such a critical crossover point because the black market wasn't just some minor sideline. It was an integrated, systemic feature of the American presence there, going all the way back to the 50s.
So U.S. personnel, civilian and military.
They were leveraging their ration cards for controlled goods, gas coupons, cigarettes, and trading them directly to the Spanish population.
So what does this black market tell us about the relationship between the base and the local economy?
It shows the extent to which that American bubble became this unintentional engine of economic distortion. The sources detail an OSI probe, that's the Office of Special Investigation.
OSI, got it.
And this probe uncovered something like $15,000 to $20,000 in annual illicit sales,
Wow.
flowing out of that one small gas station. And those goods were often exchanged for Spanish services, gardening, cleaning, even rent payments. It created this shadow economy, this dependency.
So if the high school and the gas station were sites of economic pressure, the high-ranking officers and diplomats, they were involved in something far more dangerous. Let's shift to that adult world of power, politics, and espionage.
The overarching tension here is Spain's really precarious transition as Franco's life is nearing its end.
Right.
The intended successor, Prince Juan Carlos, he even shows up to play golf at the American Base Club one Sunday. It just shows you how blurred these political lines were becoming. Control of this transition was everything.
And the Spanish government was not sitting on its hands. They had their own serious intelligence infrastructure.
Absolutely. The powerful head of government, Carrero Blanco, he created SECC, the Spanish Intelligence Service, and it was specifically focused on contrasubversion.
And their major project.
The Jano Archive. It was a centralized information system designed to gather and store, I think, 10,000 extensive files on key individuals. The idea was to ensure the post-Franco world would be controlled and orderly.
Everyone was under surveillance.
Everyone. And this political infrastructure required human intelligence. So we meet two key assets, basically operating in opposite directions.
Who are they?
First, there's Carmen, secretary to Carrero Blanco. She's a reluctant asset collecting intelligence for SEC. And then, on the American side, you have Margot Dell, a U.S. colonel's wife, who is spying for a U.S. lieutenant named Clancy.
So the domestic front, weaponized.
Exactly. And the core obsession for U.S. intelligence was Spain's nuclear program. It was known as Project Audiolibro, and it aimed to produce military-grade plutonium-239.
Why was this such a high-priority threat for the U.S.?
For the U.S., this represented a potential loss of control in a critical NATO-adjacent country. The Americans suspected, and they were correct, that the Spanish knowledge base came from the 1966 Palomares incident.
That's where the U.S. thermonuclear bombs accidentally crashed onto Spanish soil.
That's the one. So the fear was acute. Spain, maybe with some French help, was on the verge of developing its own nuclear deterrent. And that would just fundamentally alter the balance of power in the Mediterranean.
So this incredibly high-stakes mission falls to Margot Dell, using the most innocent cover you could imagine, the Officers' Wives Club.
It's classic tradecraft hidden in plain sight. Margot organizes a visit to the Junta de Energía Nuclear, or JEJ, the sensitive research facility. And her objective, given to her by Clancy, is to use this domestic tour to figure out exactly how much plutonium they had produced and where it was being stored.
And the visit was successful, despite the security risks.
The sheer audacity of it is stunning. The wives are allowed to tour this incredibly sensitive complex. While Margot is focused on collecting details, other American wives are just, taking photos of statues and buildings.
Which was actually useful intel.
Inadvertently providing key visual intelligence on the facilities. It's wild. The fact that the tour was rushed because of radiological risks, yet they still paused for group photos, it just shows that tension between domestic normality and espionage.
So while the Americans were spying on Spanish nuclear ambitions, the Spanish elite were managing their own intense secrets.
Yes, secrets of affluence and infidelity. And this brings us to Luis Gandara, the Opus Dei banker.
That Opus Dei label is crucial here.
It's everything. It signifies this strict commitment to Catholic piety and moral rectitude, yet Gandara is juggling his professional and personal life across this huge moral chasm. Professionally, he's financing political transitions, dealing with massive corruption schemes.
And his personal life is just as conflicted. He's having this intense affair with Victoria, or Vicky, the wealthy Baronesa de Corrento.
And the sources detail the almost ritualistic nature of their moral tightrope walk. Their secret meetings happen immediately after Gandara's early Sunday Mass.
Oh.
And Vicky greets him, sometimes in a completely transparent negligee. Gandara, meanwhile, is seeking penance for his adultery, reciting a rosary, which he knows is grossly insufficient for what he's doing.
It sounds like Vicky the Baronesa really holds the power in that relationship.
Oh, she absolutely does. Her background is key here.
Yeah.
She was a former Costa Fleming girl.
And what does that mean?
That was the term for women who, since the 50s, had entertained and navigated relationships with wealthy or powerful American personnel. She understood how to manage powerful men. She was setting the rules.
Even outside of these illicit deals and affairs, this social front was just a constant performance for both groups.
Even leisure was networking. The sources describe Americans enjoying Madrid nightlife, guided by sergeants like Larry on these Tasca-hopping tours, visiting local flamenco clubs.
Legendary places.
Legendary. Recalling famous anecdotes, like the time Ava Gardner and Frank Sinatra had a huge public fight there that ended in a slap. It just shows how the American experience was simultaneously contained and completely woven into the rich fabric of Madrid life.
As these two cultures mingled, they couldn't help but uncover these deeply hidden tensions. One of the most surprising involved, Masonry.
This is a vital historical detail. Carmen, Carrero Blanco's secretary, is just shocked to discover that Colonel Del Margo's husband is a high-ranking Mason.
And in Franco's Spain, that was a huge deal.
A huge deal. In that deeply Catholic right-wing regime, Masons were seen as existential enemies. The regime historically persecuted them, viewed them as subversive. This wasn't a cultural disagreement. This was political danger.
And this tension even reached inside the walls of the U.S. base.
Exactly. A base commander actually tried to ban Masonic meetings based on a U.S. federal anti-discrimination rule, which is just a ridiculous pretext. It forced the Masons to meet off-base, often fleeing to France. The Americans were importing their social structures, and they clashed violently with the political reality of Spain.
So the price of being an American abroad was high, both economically and culturally.
Economically, yeah. U.S. personnel living off-base often paid up to 3 times the rent of Spaniards, simply because they were American and paid in dollars.
And culturally.
Constant misunderstandings, especially with local groups like the Gypsy community. And sometimes, unfortunately, this friction led to violence, with incidents involving military members off the base.
This whole deep dive has really been about transience and the looming end of an era. The Spanish government was even commenting to the U.S. about Vietnam, seeing it as this long occupation against infiltration. But at the end of the day, all these geopolitical struggles just ended in small, personal goodbyes.
The sources bring us right back to that concept of hola y adios. Mary, the cheerleader, makes that sudden departure on the Space A flight. And Lolo, the Spanish boy, he's just left to process a relationship that was so intense, his first, but was always destined to be cut short. He has to internalize that the Americans' time was always temporary.
So the sources reveal that whether you are an American teenager running a black market or a Spanish diplomat positioning for the post-Franco world, your life was governed by constant surveillance, Jano, Sassy, Clancy's agents, and the certainty that all relationships, personal and political, were temporary.
The scope of this narrative is just vast and incredibly rich. It weaves together high school football, nuclear policy, the secrets of bankers and adulterers, all these delicate maneuvers of the post-Franco era. It's military life, cultural commentary, and espionage rolled into one intense package. It really makes the source material essential reading for anyone interested in that Cold War era and its human cost.
Indeed. The American personnel who served and left Spain, they carried a patch that read, "Gone, but not forgotten."
But here's the final thought for you to mull over. What about the Spanish people? The ones who couldn't just catch a space of flight, like Carmen or Lolo or Luis. Their lives were permanently altered by the culture, the commerce, the hidden agendas the Americans brought to their doorstep. The question isn't whether the Americans forgot Spain, but who, in the end, was truly forgotten.